But apparently, Ridge Holland is the guy that we saw when we were first started watching NXT, like almost 2 years ago. It may have been during the pandemic. I think it was the empty arena era. He's a big, jacked up bodybuilder guy. He's strong as a bull, obviously. And he caught a guy on a crossbody coming over the top rope. He's standing on the floor, and it just demolished his leg. And he just went down in a heap screaming, and they carted him off, and he was out for a year or whatever. And now he's back. And Sheamus and Holland are wrestling Kofi and Big E, the New Day. I guess, the other kid who used to be Consequences Creed in
Xavier Woods.
Xavier Cugat. That's right. He's Charo's husband. I guess he's injured because we never see him anymore. But anyway, they're having a tag team match, and this was just a regular TV match, and it was a modern match. They all just took turns doing stuff to each other. There's nominally a baby face and a heel, but they wrestle the same way. There's not really, you don't shine the baby faces at start and get some heat and have some tag team moves. You just trade places doing shit back and forth to people. And they went to a break, and I guess they got some heat on Big E in the break because as soon as they came back, he hit a belly-to-belly overhead throw in the ring. And then they made the simultaneous cold tags, and here come the new guys to start over again. And Kofi made a comeback that Sheamus took one bump for, and they got into a four-way. And Big E shit-canned Ridge Holland out on the floor and charged for the dealy day where he does the spear through the ropes on the guy to the floor, but Holland moved, so then Big E just flies through the ropes and takes a hard bump to the floor there. And then Holland goes up and just traps him and gives him a belly-to-belly overhead throw on the floor. And he didn't turn him. He just didn't turn him. He got him up off the ground, and then you could see he arched his back and just took Big E straight over head first over the top of him. It wasn't like it wasn't a back arch. It was he arched his calves and the back of his knees, and Holland was just kind of going flat down. And I don't care how strong you are, as Taz said somewhere here lately, it's not strength, it's technique. And I mean, I don't know why you would try to do a move like that to a guy that not only Big E is not only bulky and heavy, but he's short and squat and wide. I don't mean short like he's 5'2", but I mean, for that amount of weight, he's not a tall man. It's like trying to suplex a refrigerator. And yes, they did it in the ring. The ring has a little more spring to it. But the more important question is why in a television match, again, that nobody's going to remember, and I think we said the same thing about Ridge Holland's injury, a television match that nobody's going to remember next week because they see so many of them, the guys don't stop and think anymore. And if that move was run by an agent, maybe the agents don't stop and think anymore. I would have a hard time thinking that those guys said beforehand to an agent that's in charge of their match, yeah, and then I'll grab him and give him a belly-to-belly overhead throw on the floor. And one of the agents didn't press the pause button. And so what? Because why would you do that? And I'm sure that they were both going along with it. It's not like the guy just went into business for himself, and you could see Big E was trying to take it, but you can't do that on your own. And the whole thing is, okay, Brian, I was in charge of the WWE's lead developmental program for 6 years, correct?
Correct.
Between 23 and 16 and a half years ago or thereabouts. And I wouldn't stake my life on it because there may be some, distant memory that I just don't remember it being brought up, but I will stake my livelihood, life, and reputation, and etc., that it didn't happen twice in 6 years that two guys came up to me with the idea to give somebody a belly-to-belly overhead suplex on the floor in a match. And that encompasses guys just into wrestling school, guys with a little bit of experience, WWE contracted talent, veterans that would come in and assist, with training or be on our shows or whatever. I don't remember one time anybody, but I definitely know it didn't happen twice, suggesting that as a thing to do. And if there was going to be something like that done, that's why I'm saying the guys have lost sight of what they're doing, and they just get so numb themselves, like the viewers get numb to seeing this. The guys get numb to calling it and to doing it. And I remember in OVW, generally the person that would run stuff by me that I would have to nip in the bud for a positive reason was Flash Flanagan. Because Flash, he jumped off the balcony in Puerto Rico, almost killed himself, take a bump. He didn't come up with shit that was dangerous for other people, but he'd come up with shit that was dangerous for himself. And several times I'd, no, we don't need to do that, blah, 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 whatever. But he was a guy that wanted to, create the moments and also, but we applied it to the finishes of the matches or to angles, not just moves in the matches that people weren't going to remember. And there was a outsized risk involved and an outsized chance that something could go wrong. And it was not even that important a part of the match. A bump like that again in the territory days, but also in the WWF, in the 90s even, in other companies more recently, that's the kind of thing that a booker would go to top guys because he would see a guy do something in the ring, and maybe he'd get an idea. And you would, if you were the booker, you would go to guys and say, hey, do you think you could do this? Maybe let's go out and try to walk through that. Or do you think you could take this bump? Or could you guys together do this and pull this off? Blah, blah, blah. If it's something dangerous, you come up with a way to figure it into the finish or to figure it into an angle where it's not wasted, where everybody's confident that they can do it going in and pull it off safely, and where it will register because it looks like a big deal if you make it one. So bumps like that, yes, a lot of times guys came up with shit, but they would run it by whoever the booker was, or whoever the agent or producer or whatever you want to call the authority figure. And or a booker would come up with something and go to guys and see if they could fucking pull it off, but it was because it was an important part of the fucking program, not just a move in a match. But they've lost the plot, as they say over and across the pond. All the guys, a lot of the agents have lost sight because they've seen so much. Now they don't even think anything about it. I bet they could have run that through. Okay, then he'll take the bump to the floor, and then Ridge will go over and boom, grab him belly to belly, overhead, boom, and then Kofi will climb to that. They just walk right by it, run right over it, just goes past them. But if they were thinking about it as we used to, and sometimes anything can go by one person, but everybody would be thinking about the match in days gone by as a match, and what you were saying was going to look like and materialize, and how do we do that, etc., and whether it was called for. It wasn't just we're going to call this move and that move. They've watched video games for 20 years. Nobody sells shit in the video games. It's amazing. They pop right back up, especially when you start the game over again. Nobody gets a broken neck. We haven't mentioned yet. Everybody knows already. It's on all the news, but that's what Big E got, was a broken neck. They're not going to have or to perform surgery on him, thankfully enough. But he's got 2 broken vertebrae. They just didn't go out of place, but apparently the C1, which I saw a quote from a orthopedic or some type of doctor on the internet concerning that it's a question now whether he'll ever wrestle again, because the C1 does not always heal properly or completely or whatever. But the point is, everybody's just going past that. We used to, if a guy was willing to take a bump like that, as I said, we used to make it an angle, make it a finish, make it a moment, make money out of it, and once in a blue moon, you see this guy do that. You usually, guys that we've talked about, had those trademark bumps that nobody else took, that were just wild and looked like they were out of control, because that guy was the one that had the key of how to do it. You saw it once every blue moon. He did it in different territories, or you didn't do it on TV. You did it in the houses, so you could do it in front of the house show people that paid, but it'd be brand new to them because it hadn't been on TV or whatever. Lawler used to do the Georgia the Jungle bump off the edge of the stage, face first into the concrete wall at the Louisville Gardens, once about every 2.5, 3 years. It was fucking outrageous, and nobody else going to do anything like that. They couldn't. It was one of his things. But now everybody's just throwing in these moves willy-nilly without not only considering whether they're risky to them physically, but also that's why the matches, they all look so out of place, because they can't sell the fact that they just took a full backdrop over the top to the floor, concrete floor, because they got to get back up and catch somebody. And that's what a lot of those dives that miss their target and just end up, the guy just dives over the top rope, flips in the air, and lands splat on the goddamn floor outside because the guy missed him, or he went over his head or whatever. And he's on his feet in 10 or 15 seconds to catch the guy or do the next move. 40 years ago, if Dusty Rhodes could have found somebody that could take willingly and without killing himself, run and dive over the top rope and flip and take a flat back bump on the goddamn floor on purpose, he would have made him $1 million. Because he'd have made it an angle and a finish and a hospitalization and a return for revenge and whatever the fuck else. And people would have shit themselves for 10 years watching the replay. Now it happens 3 times a segment. So anyway, the match ended right after that when good old Butch distracted Kofi and he got kicked and beat, but Big E now is, and then Butch got in and was able to get some heat at. Now he was the bruiserweight, and he was this tough guy that kicked everybody's ass, and now he's the little punk kid that has a mental issue, and when the big guys get the opponent down, then he gets on them and beats them up, and it looked like one of the little rascals fighting over milk money. But meanwhile, Big E's out on the floor with the doctors, and they're about to stretcher him out. So, I mean, everybody loves this guy, and everybody works with him. I've never met him, don't wish him ill. And it wasn't his fault, except for, if I'd have been him, I would have said, I don't think I'm going to take that. And let's come up with something else. But apart from that, he bears no responsibility. And the other guy is just green. And, don't do shit you don't know how to do. But he didn't do it maliciously, and I'm sure he feels horrible. But again, goddamn it, just everybody think about what you're fucking doing, and nobody remembers it. Nobody remembers it after the fucking show's over because they've seen 13 other things that looked like they should have hospitalized somebody too, because we've gone too fucking far, which is what I've been saying for the last 20 years was going to take place. How do you top it? And now it's you've got the guys who are strong enough personalities that they can actually work and people are interested. But for most of the guys, either through lack of personality or rotten booking, the fans are not interested in the wrestlers anymore. They're interested in the car wreck. They don't want to see the race car go out and turn left for 500 miles. They want to see it fucking turn right into the wall. Maybe take some spectators out with it. And then everybody gets all fucking concerned and fired up about, oh gosh, it's horrible, the pain and suffering that this wrestler or that wrestler went through. And they're the same ones that go, well, all they did was wrestle and the guy body slammed the other guy. Nobody did any flips. Nobody did any dives. Nobody went through any furniture. Well, fuck, there's been a reason for 100 years why nobody did that shit. Because you end up in the hospital or paralyzed or in surgery. They've just figured this out the last 10 or 15 years. I hate to be a one to dominate the conversation, but those are my thoughts.
There's not too much for me to add to that. Obviously, you have an expertise here that I can't add to this. It's a horrible injury, horrible to see. Won't be surprised when we hear that because of the shape he's in, it helped him, and maybe, helped him stay alive.
Well, yeah. I mean, the average person taking that bump straight on top of their head, they were done.
Yeah.
And the doctors have said this guy was lucky, but if he didn't have a neck like a fucking maple tree, it would have been over with. And it can happen at any time. And I know some of the AEW fans are going to say, well, that's good. There are at least 10 incidents on every AEW television show where something looks like it would have hurt some son of a bitch more than even this. He landed right on his head, but I mean, theirs are even more ridiculous. The Guevara doing the double cannonball off the top from 20 feet through the table flat onto the concrete floor. That he should have been paralyzed.
I can't watch Misawa matches anymore. And I used to love Misawa because I know how it ends.
Yeah.
And every match is leading to the ending. And I hope Big E gets better. By all accounts, a really nice guy. And like you said, the big, I don't want to say complaint, I don't know how you phrase it, but the big issue I had was why you're doing this. When you really stop and break it down, you realize how far we've gotten, because it's just like, oh yeah, of course they were doing that. But then it's like, why are you doing a belly-to-belly overhead suplex on the floor?
To a 300-pound man.
On the opening match on SmackDown.
Yeah. That's what it's come to be expected. And then all the guys are trying to top themselves. And like I said, you got Sammy Guevara, good talent, great talent, fine young man, personality, blah, 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 athletic. He's going to fucking kill himself. And he gets over without doing that shit because he's still got, as a heel, we mentioned the slappable face, or as a baby face, a nice grin. And he's athletic and he's young, so you naturally want to root for the guy anyway. He does. And even if, I guess what I'm trying to say is the same, it's the Young Bucks principle, though, or it's any of these the trampoline cowboys. Just because you can do something and just because it gets you over doesn't mean you should be allowed to for the good of the general welfare of the rest of the business. Because if a 190-pound guy, am I being generous to Sammy, can fall at a high rate of speed from 20 feet in the air, flat of his back through a table onto the concrete floor and get up and continue the match, then what do you have to do to the 250-pound world champion or the fucking legendary icon or whatever that you got to run over him with a steamship or bring out Sting's flamethrower? It doesn't make sense, and it hurts the overall product and everybody in it, because some guys that would draw more money because they are personalities and they are star level workers and performers, but they're not going to be taking bumps like that, nor should they. When you try to do an angle with them, everybody goes, well, that couldn't have hurt him too bad because look what happened to Sammy and he got right back up. Even if they're not analyzing that deeply on the surface, I talk a lot about subliminal images and the subliminal impressions and just the ones that are made over and over. That's how musicians get over as rock stars. That's how actors get over as movie stars. They make enough impressions, whether on the surface or subliminal, in a positive manner that you get interested and you get involved. You want to see more. The only subliminal message that we get from most wrestling today is it's a live action video game and nobody's really getting hurt, except they're all really getting hurt. And I don't know how difficult that is to understand. When you tell everybody that everything's bullshit and it's all set up ahead of time, we're all fucking bosom buddies and lifelong friends, and we're just glad to be here and we're cooperating with each other to put a show on for our fans. But meanwhile, we're doing stupid shit that's unrealistic and would never happen in a million years that you would ever be able to get up from, but we're really hurting each other while we're doing it. But at the same time, you know it's entertainment, so we're going to wink at you while we break our bodies down and put ourselves in early wheelchairs. I can't figure this shit out. I cannot follow that train of logic. So anyway, as I said, I've been in a lot of, not just OVW, Ring of Honor training seminars, wrestling school workout sessions of all kinds. And yes, you do get guys up and obviously it's not been over the last 5, 6, 7 years when this has really taken off. It was always there, but it's really taken off. But even 10 years ago, when you got any kind of talented wrestling school student in any kind of competent school, they could kind of get the picture of don't do something that not only should kill somebody and they pop right back up, but continue to do it because it makes everybody look bad afterwards, and then it makes everybody's job harder. The same thing as kayfabing. If you told guys in OVW it worked just fine, except when I didn't get backup from the WWF office, if you tell guys that this is a magic show and we don't reveal our secrets, they get the message. But nobody bothers to tell them that now because they think, well, everybody's smart, so we'll just spill our fucking guts. Name, rank, and serial number. Okay, so they know, so tell them what the main thing that they already know, but you don't have to give them all the details.
It's not what it is or isn't, it's how you treat it.
Yes. And I love the fact that people are, wow, Cornette exposes the business all the time, tells us exactly how, well, yeah, everybody else is. They just don't understand how the fuck to do it to begin with, so at least I'm telling you the right story. And I'm not in the wrestling business anymore, and I don't give a shit because they fucked it all up. But you can still follow some basic rules of the road, and everybody won't end up in an iron lung, as Chief Jay Strongbow would say. So I hope he gets better. I hope he comes back to wrestling. I hope he doesn't take any more belly-to-belly overhead suplexes. But it's not like this is the last time this is going to fucking happen. I'm surprised it doesn't more often. And it's not necessary.
No one got hurt, so you look past it. But to your point, earlier in the match, I mean, a minute before that, whatever, Kofi Kingston did a short dive, off the apron, did a flip onto whoever on the floor. All but missed him, all but landed on the floor, barely touching the guy. Thankfully, no one got hurt. But that happens all the time. We see people do flips where they hit no one. What's the point?
Well, but it's actually, in some cases, might be worse, depending on, as Ridge Holland can vouch for, if you're the guy catching rather than the guy diving. Because now you've got 200 and something pounds from a height at a high rate of speed coming at you that you've got to somehow break the fall of without breaking yourself in the process. And at the speed they're coming, and now they're doing flips and fucking pirouettes in the air. They look like fucking Flipper the Magic Dolphin. You got elbows. You got feet, heels, boot heels coming at you, knees, heads. What hard part's going to hit me? I better turn my head. Well, if I turn my head, I can't see who's coming. Maybe that's why they're missing everybody. They don't want to get plastered in the face. It's goddamn foolish. It's overdone. Everybody does a dive. And I attended. Wait a minute. Let me do some quick math in my head. When I was a fan, when I was a photographer, I attended in some years between 150 and 200 live events. And I would say during the course of that time, 4, 5, 6 times, especially if Bill Dundee was motivated and had a real good opponent, you would see somebody dive through the ropes. That's it. Because what the fuck? It wasn't Mexico and it wasn't Japan. And there's a high risk of flying into the front row and hurting yourself or getting sued. So why do it? But now, and that's why it got over when people started doing it. Go, wow. And now it's like, oh, God, this again? And so they got to spin, or they got a corkscrew, or they got a backflip, or they got whatever the fuck. And at this point, it's a diving competition. I'm talking about in an actual pool. What they ought to do was scratch the ring and just bring in a swimming pool and 2 diving boards at each end and have a diving competition. And at least they could land in the water and they wouldn't fucking paralyze themselves.
Even that hurts. When I was a kid, that's all we did was the Superfly splash and the Macho Man elbow into the pool. It always hurt. It's like doing a belly flop.
Yeah.
It hurts.
So that's at this point, even if again, everybody, oh, you're just behind the times, just do something different since we've seen it. Figure out something else to do that looks like it hurts somebody, but doesn't. That's kind of the idea of this business. Instead of doing shit, let's see how many risks we can take because we're all a bunch of fucking morons. And you know what? Part of the thing is, obviously, they get paid. They get paid their contract money. Guys on contract now, they get paid whether they're hurt or not. If you hurt yourself, especially if it was your own fucking fault. In the old days, you were on your own. That's why you didn't hurt yourself. Except if you couldn't help it. Shit happens, but not that often. And now everybody, well, okay, so now but here's the thing. Even if you get hurt and you still get paid, you're still hurt. And that's painful. And you got to go through all that shit to fix whatever it is. And then by the time you get back, you might have lost your spot and it cost you money in the long run. So here's the idea is don't get hurt. Don't hurt nobody else. I don't know what more. I mean, they're not going to listen anyway. But that's everything that we say comes to pass because you know it's going to, because you've seen the fucking, as you said, you saw the Misawa movie. You know how it comes out. And it's not like, yes, Mick Foley is still ambulatory. Bless him and thank goodness. Everybody said he'd be in a wheelchair by this point, but he's still gone through a lot of pain and inflammation, as Dusty would say, and he's a freak physical case. I don't, it part of the fun of wrestling, at least for me, for a number of people involved in it, was getting to go out and get to people emotionally, and to either cheer you or boo you, to buy tickets to see you, to have that feedback from the live crowd, to tear the house down, blah, blah, blah. You tried to put as much into the moves you did or the things you did physically as you could to elicit those responses and to accomplish all those things, make the big check and have the great match and draw the big crowd and be in the main event and all that stuff. But thinking of Midnight Express tag team moves, that was a byproduct of, okay, how are we going to have a good match and how are we going to tear the house down? How are we going to be in the main event and make money? It wasn't, wow, we could do this move. It was, we could do this on TV as a finish, or we could do this in an angle to further this thing. It was a component, not the goddamn thing we were thinking about. And Bobby Eaton took a bunch of he'd take the hip toss on the floor and the backdrop on the floor. That's because nobody else was doing it, and he could, for whatever reason, and get up afterwards. But it wasn't like constantly, and he didn't do all those things in every match. It was broken out during the big angle or the big fucking whatever. And still he had physical problems with his hip and his knees and his back and everything else. But the idea that it should just be these holy shit moments alone without all the other context around it is why that everybody just cheers and pops when they see this happen, and then nobody remembers anything afterwards. And you'd have to keep a written list of who did dives just on last week's Dynamite. It's not like, wow, the Superfly splash. It's like, oh, there was a dive, and there's a dive, and this guy did dive, and that guy did the dive. And do we have the list of divers? It's so you want to paralyze yourself or somebody else for that, go ahead. I'll be over here. I'm done.